Hey everybody, my name is Mike Johnson and you are watching the Success Estate Podcast, episode number 2 of season number 3. I hope you were able to check out last week's video about home warranties with Beth Elbert. Today I have an awesome guest, Mr. David Wolfe. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you having me.
Sure. David, would you mind giving a quick introduction, who you are and what you do?
Yes, my name is David Wolfe. I sell home and auto insurance primarily, what we call P&C in insurance, property and casualty insurance is the other a word for that, but we call it P&C a lot of times. I mainly focus on helping lenders and realtors find their clients good, affordable options for homeowners insurance and then auto insurance to go along with that.
Sure. And which company do you represent?
So I'm with Goosehead Insurance. We're what most people refer to as a independent model, to where we offer a lot of different carriers. We're able to put the power of that choice in the consumer's hand, where they can kind of shop the market for insurance.
Is that like, I don't know if this is like the right term, is that like wholesale, almost like I've heard the term like wholesale?
Yeah, the term broker kind of resonates with that, where like a mortgage broker can typically shop for better interest rates. We can shop for better insurance rates in that sense. So we're not beholden to one particular carrier, whatever makes sense for the customer or whatever benefits them the most.
Sure. How long have you been with Goosehead?
So it's going on 6 years now. On the agency there, over off of the loop there. About 6 years now.
Got you. Now, was that your first 6 years in the insurance industry, or did you just change over to?
I worked for a captive, what we call a captive insurance agency, where we had just that one product to offer. Did that for about 7 years. Felt like it was about, it was time for me to explore other ways to help my customers. And I thought that Goosehead has turned out to be the really best model for what I was trying to achieve.
Now, you said captive. You just, so I'm assuming some of the bigger names that we've seen in insurance, they're just primarily just selling their product alone.
Right, meaning that they don't have another option. Your Farmers, State Farm, Farm Bureau, they would be referred to as captive, in that their agents just offer typically that one primary product that's underwritten by their company.
Got you. Now, how'd you get started in insurance?
I had always been interested in insurance. It just seemed like a great way to help people. It was sales, but it was more relationship oriented, to where I could develop that with that and have a potential for income, and it was a great potential for income as well. Honestly.
Right. And how long have it been now since you started in?
2009.
2009. Okay. All right. What were you doing before that?
Actually, I was in the mortgage business, so I was working in that industry. The financial crisis happened, and some things changed, so it got me looking around at different options at that point.
What was it like during that? Because so 2008 is when the bottom fell out. Were there any? I know it's a little bit off topic. Did you see any like signals like, hey, there's something coming here?
I guess I didn't at the time. I was looking to I worked at a local bank here, so I was looking to my higher ups on kind of how to read that. And from everything they could tell, it was a lot of course they probably didn't want to spook everybody. But looking back, it was really behind the scenes. It was really going on to where if they had exposure to certain kinds of products, they were going to be in trouble. So I was unfortunate that they did have exposure to that, and it cost the bank, its solvency, I guess you'd say.
I think on the backside, I know that it was terrible, as far as the experience that everybody went through. The recession was just tough. On the backside of it, I think we have a much safer way of delivering mortgage products, and things like that. So
I would think so. Yeah, I would hope that they have corrected some of that and not let that get out of hand again.
Would you ever consider going back?
I mean, the mortgage business is one of the tougher businesses that I've ever been involved in. So I like insurance. I have more control over, things in insurance as far as if I can deliver myself. A lot of times mortgage, it's not only about what you do, but what the people you work with, what you're relying on, underwriters. So it's a whole nother set of circumstances.
Now, where are you from? I heard you say here. Are you from here?
I grew up in Hurst, a little town in between Fort Worth and Dallas.
Yeah.
So that's where I grew up.
Okay, got you. That's about 2.5 hours from here.
Yes.
You still go back? You have any?
I don't have a lot of family there. I go back with my kids and go to sporting events.
Sure.
So I look forward to going back.
Speaking of sporting events, anytime I see you on Facebook, it seems like you're at a baseball game.
Yeah, I do love that in my spare time. So I'm a big Mavericks fan. Is really my passion is.
Okay.
So
as far as did you play baseball? Or?
I played a little basketball, but in high school a little bit.
Sure.
But it's just kind of been a sport that I've loved. I can play a little bit.
Sure. Is it just something that your boys are into? Because I always see you taking a picture with your son.
My 10-year-old Grayson, he told me he wanted to try everything. So he wants to play baseball, and so he wants to be open to figuring out what he likes. So
that's
I
important.
admire that in him.
That's important.
Right.
I think I talked. Actually, I had a discussion with my mom the other day. I'm just telling her, as much as the boys want to experience, I want some experiences I'm going to force on them. The great thing in this industry that I feel like a benefit is that I've gained relationships with people that I probably wouldn't have if I had a typical 9 to 5. So I connect with all kind of people that are wanting to buy, sell, lease, own properties and just want to, learn about maintenance and things like that. I connect with a lot of different people in a lot of different industries. And I plan on leveraging those any way that I can to say, hey, can my children come sit with you, talk to you about what you do? Can they come to work with you? If you own your own business, can they just come see it? It's free labor. We'll call it an internship. Right. It's free labor. Just let them come see what you do, how you do it. Sports, everything, piano, anything that they can get their hands on, I want them to try.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that the other day. I've met a lot of women, in business, and I have a 14-year-old daughter, and I was thinking about that the other day for her exposure, just to spend a day with those women that are achieving certain things, to open her mind to what's out there in the business world and how that would benefit her. So.
Especially here in East Texas. Like I don't know if everybody had an experience like I did. I felt kind of limited. I was like, man, what else is out there? My mom is from Philadelphia, so we got a chance to go up there a few times when I was growing up. But we primarily we didn't go a lot of places outside of Texas. And I'm like, is this all there is? Yeah. I wanted to go to the University of Maine out of high school. I wanted to get as far away from here as possible. Wow. I never made it past Lufkin. But it was a good effort though. Any sports, anything in your college? Did you go to college or anything like that?
I went to Baylor.
Okay.
Yeah, so I went to Waco and graduated from there.
Sure.
So I followed their sports pretty passionately. I was excited about them winning the national championship a few years ago.
Awesome.
So,
I'm sure you had all your apparel on and everything. Huh?
Yeah, I never thought I'd see that in my lifetime, to see Baylor basketball win the national championship. So
Texas is starting to do a lot better. All their colleges in both. Football was, it's kind of unexpected. It feels like a lot of the football teams took a dip. It seems like they're on the rise again. Different schools like TCU and U of H this year in the tournament, I know they got an early oust, but an earlier oust than they wanted. But, it seems like sports in Texas, college-wise, are coming up.
Yeah.
The Mavs, Spurs, the Rockets. I'm a Spurs fan,
Y'all are looking for that top pick.
We're trying to get Wembanyama.
I can't pronounce his name, but I know about him.
We're trying to learn French down there in San Antonio. We had Tony Parker, so if we do the same thing again, we may be all right. But I know Dallas is kind of there.
With y'all's luck, history in the lottery, I wouldn't be surprised if
we would get a great pick.
Yeah.
No, but get it back, to the topic of the day. If y'all don't know, I sell, help people buy and sell homes, specifically when people are buying or even for homeowners. People will come to me and they have a lot of questions about home insurance. Now, last week we talked about, David, I had Beth Elbert on, and we were talking about home warranties.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, of course, get those two confused. Hey, I know I got a home warranty, and there's, damage to the property or something like that. Can you explain what the purpose of home insurance is? Why do people have home insurance?
Okay. The main purpose is to protect you from those catastrophic, what I would call, events that can really put you in a bind financially, and you want to protect your investment with that and not have those unexpected big dollar expenses come up. Things like your roof, primarily that's one of the ones that can happen a lot, where that puts people in a really financial bind to have to come out and get a new roof for $10,000 or $12,000.
Yep.
We have hailstorms here a lot in our area, so that's one thing. We write what's called an open perils policy, which means it will cover pretty much a lot of the things maybe you don't associate with home insurance. Of course, the main ones are fire, windstorm, those kinds of things, theft. So they're pretty comprehensive. You mentioned home warranties. They also have a really big place in that they'll cover things like your systems in the house, like your air conditioning. So those are some of the limitations of home insurance. Just those maintenance issues with those kinds of things.
You said open peril?
Yeah,
is that what you said?
There's basically two types of policies here in Texas that agents sell. Named perils, which they name the perils that are covered. Like they'll say, okay, fire, lightning, windstorm, those are covered. But if it's not named, then it's potentially not covered. So
because I'll see that sometimes. Would that include things like possible flood damage?
So flood, and for flood, it's always a separate policy on that.
Always a separate policy, even if it was like this was just a freak, not necessarily like flood insurance, but like, hey, we just got a ton of, I don't know, a hurricane came through South Texas and we just caught a lot of water, kind of like they had in Houston a few years ago, where a lot of houses end up underwater, but a lot of people didn't have coverage for that.
Yeah, and I would still say they need a flood policy for that, a separate, because homeowners is limited on that. There are what we call water coverages associated with the house, but rising waters is always going to be a flood policy.
Gotcha.
So even if you're in what's called a low risk zone, you still probably would want to look at that. I think they say like 25% of flood claims are from even low risk zones. So
wow.
Everybody should consider that, I think, because that does happen.
Sure.
Like in Houston, for example, that is a big deal. So
I had read that there were a lot of people that end up, unfortunately suffering because you just for one, I don't think if you're not, I don't know, a place like East Texas especially, it seems like we're kind of secluded from a lot of the natural disasters that deal with water. It's actually great when we get rain here. So it's something that I'd be like, well, I don't think that it would ever flood here, but I guess anything is possible.
I'm kind of like that on that. I've heard stories about, like in Kilgore a few years ago, they have some low areas that if they get just the right amount of rain in a short period of time, those areas can all of a sudden turn into big problems. So it does happen around here. It just depends on kind of the location and how much rain they get in a short amount of time.
As far as coverage, for homes, how should people, especially, you know, those that are, you know, that are trying to survey what options they have in home insurance, you know, especially those buyers, you know, you've got a big decision to make in the closing process. Mm-hmm. You got a house on the, you know, it's fun. I tell everybody, it's fun house hunting. Mm-hmm. When you're house hunting, you've got your pre-approval. Let's house hunt. Let's have fun. As soon as you get under contract, put your boots on, strap your boots up, mm-hmm. and get your fingers ready, stretch out. We're going to be doing a lot of work, you know, during the closing period. Mm-hmm. One of those big decisions is home insurance selection. Mm-hmm. You got to have that before you can close on a home.
Right.
What should people be looking for in coverage whenever they're?
Yeah, I think the temptation on that is to always go towards who's the lowest cost. Mm-hmm. But I think that's probably a mistake in that, you know, there's so many variables to a home policy that can make it lower cost, but if those things end up happening that you've, say, excluded from the policy or not have covered, then that's where that can really hurt you at that time.
Sure.
I think people need to see it more as something they research, just like anything else where, you know, maybe the lowest cost is not necessarily my best choice here.
Sure.
This is going to be my biggest asset I ever purchase. How can I protect that? If it's $300 more a year, maybe I need to look at that. Sure. And talking to somebody like me or somebody that can run you through all those options and say, you know, I really recommend this. This is what I've seen in my business might come up and be a problem for you. Sure. Later down the road.
And especially, you know, I always want people to consider the fact that $300 is for the year. And you're going to split that mm-hmm. into 12 payments, mm-hmm. you know. So when you're paying on your mortgage, a lot of people get tricked, of course, on Zillow, because you go in and you see on Zillow they've got a portion where the estimated monthly amount is, and it's always really low, right. You know. And a lot of people get going with that, and I have to educate them like, wait a minute, you need to add in the portion. There's a selection that you can make on your home search on Zillow to say add in estimated taxes and insurance, mm-hmm. you know, for the area, and that gives a more a better picture of what you'll be paying monthly. Mm-hmm. But $300 a year, what are you looking at, $20 some odd dollars mm-hmm. a month added to your, and having the potential to cover something that could be be detrimental for your pocketbook.
Right. That's the way I would see that for sure. I mean, I would not look at it as like a commodity that one is just the same as everything else. You know, you need to talk to a professional about the differences, and just like everything else, if you're a smart consumer, you're better off
sure.
With everything. So
sure.
So having somebody you trust like that is important.
Has there ever been a time where you like tell somebody, hey, you maybe should consider this, and they didn't get it, and then they end up?
Yeah, let me think on that.
I'm not asking for a specific story or anything like that, but, you know, has there ever been, if you ever had, like, in the back of your mind, like, I wanted you to get this coverage?
Yeah, it mainly comes from, like, replacement cost or water coverages, or just those limits that people tend to underestimate, you know, what that claim might be. For water coverages, you know, broken pipes. You know, we had a big freeze here a couple mm-hmm. years ago, and I had a client. Luckily, we had him covered correctly, where, you know, it was $100,000 plus water claim because they were not at home when it happened. It was in the ceiling, so it pretty much just he had to redo the whole house.
$100,000.
Yeah, the last time I looked, it was.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, it was over that. I think ended up being.
Oh my gosh!
So those are the kinds of things that you don't want to be stuck with. You know, limits that are too low or being the wrong kind of policy, because that stuff is real life happening. You know, every day
sure.
To people, and the surprise of that is just can really be like that kind of a loss can be catastrophic on somebody's
sure.
finances. So.
When you said limits, what do you mean when you're talking about limits?
Like for example, on water coverages, there are basically 4 kinds of water coverage that can happen in a house: sudden and accidental, water backup, foundation water for like pipes in your foundation that would buzz. Right. and then even slow leaking pipes. So every carrier has some limits there, and a lot of them default on that lower option because that obviously gives the lower price.
Sure.
But if you get caught in that kind of
predicament,
that can be so. There's some limits that professionals know that, okay, we need to at least keep it at this level because that I've seen that get us in trouble before. So those are the kinds of examples where you trim off $100 a year on a policy, but do you really want to take that risk?
Sure.
On that?
So would it be a good kind of summary just to say home insurance is a risk mitigation tool for our homeowners?
Yes, chances are your biggest asset, your biggest key to, they say your home is one of the things that builds wealth over time. So, you need to really focus on the risk there of what goes on with that.
Sure. When people are starting to, look at coverages, where would you, if you're sitting somebody down and saying, hey, look, what are the main things that you're pointing out to them on their insurance coverage, just in case they need to go take a look at their current policy, and compare it, and before they call you, what would you say people need to take a look at?
Yeah, they always need to start with making sure they have replacement cost. That's a big word in our business, to where you want to have, if you do have a claim, you want them to pay to replace whatever the loss is. So some policies are what we call actual cash value, to where when you go to settle a loss, you get a depreciated amount based on the claim. So a lot of people are surprised by that. When they go to get their roof, they're given a short amount in their mind because it was ACV.
I'm that guy. Right. So I found that out a couple years ago, last year. I was sitting up, and when I bought the house, we didn't have an exact age on the roof, and the inspectors, the insurance, not assessor. I don't know which word I'm looking for, but both of them put the roof to be around 12 years, 12 to 13 years old, and I didn't realize when I switched policies that it was, I guess, because of the age of the roof.
Yeah, so most carriers now, they're going to ask you that question, how old the roof is, and the reason they're asking is because as the roof ages, it's more likely to have issues. Obviously, if a storm comes, it's going to be more likely to be damaged. So they do. I have carriers that'll go to 15 years, 20 years at replacement cost. So that's the difference. Sometimes you want, okay, if you tell me my roof is a little older, I've got a carrier for that we can still get replacement costs on that. So those are the kinds of questions we ask, and those are why we're asking, just to place that correctly and to make sure we try to get you replacement cost if we can.
Yeah, that's one area that I really stress to people, like, hey, take a look at your policy, make sure you're understanding the difference between that actual cost and that replacement cost value.
And it's something you probably want to ask if you're buying a home, if the seller can tell you that, how old it is. That may be worth deciding on what kind of house you want to buy, because that's going to be something that your insurance is going to ask about and all that.
Sure. And it turned out to be pretty expensive to replace. And he just like, that was, which it just is what it is, part of the home ownership experience. But it's kind of the same thing of how I got started in this. I got started in this because I just felt like I didn't know enough about it. And I was like, what about buying a house? We had a terrible plan, Dave. We were just like, hey, we moved in with my in-laws, so we'll stay here for 6 or 7 months, save up $10,000 for a down payment, and then go from there. Which I don't know why $10,000 was the number. But I did the same thing when picking my home insurance. It was just like, hey, well, I'm going to try to save some money and make sure if a tornado came and blew the house down, that I could get it replaced, and that wasn't all that I should have been been paying attention to.
Right.
I think when I look at the number, now you have to help me with what this is called. When, if the building was destroyed and I don't know if that's the replacement cost.
Yes, we try to insure. Carriers want to insure it at replacement cost, what it would take to rebuild.
Got you.
Based on the living square footage,
Sure.
typically. So
sure. I remember looking at that and be like, this is a good amount. I should be good to go from here. And now I'm just like, oh, I was very ignorant and naive.
Right. And all of us are. If you don't deal with that every day,
Sure.
it's something you don't understand. So
Sure.
the temptation is there to not, to kind of put your head in the sand a little bit on it and just, but I think it's worth your while to talk to somebody and just get the options at least and see
definitely.
if I known it was just $200 more for that, then I definitely would have had that. So.
Are there, I feel like in every industry, but especially in the real estate industry as a whole, there's a lot of misconceptions, about different things. Do you run into a lot of common misconceptions that you can speak to about home insurance that we haven't already talked about? Like,
I think the main thing probably is that difference between what a home warranty and what a home insurance policy covers. A lot of people think that pretty much anything should be covered under their home policy.
Right.
While it can be broad, and we do try to write broad coverages like that, there's definitely a place for home warranties with your systems. If your air conditioning, for example, was damaged because lightning struck it, then that would be part of a home policy. But there's so many other variables there with like an air conditioning unit to where it's not going to be covered as a regular wear and tear was kind of what that would be.
Right.
It's not going to cover that. So you kind of have to look at homeowners insurance as for some of those bigger expenses, like your roof, like theft, those are all going to be covered.
Gotcha.
But to expect it to cover anything that happened with the house is probably not realistic.
Oh, speaking of, I've got one a conversation I have pretty regularly, and I don't know the answer to this. Trees, okay, neighbors' trees. What happens if a neighbor's tree falls out of their yard onto my house? Who's going to be covering this?
Yeah, that's a debate with adjusters too. I know if it's a dead tree, makes a lot of difference. If your neighbor has let the tree die and not taken care of it, then that, I think the way they look at that is that's a liability for them, and then their insurance would come pay for that. Most of the time, if it's not under that circumstance, if it's blown by windstorm or whatever, then your insurance is probably going to step in and cover that. But I think the answer is when it's something that they haven't maintained or it's a dead tree, then they're definitely going to be responsible for that.
How would you? I guess if you pull up, anybody can pull up and see the tree if it looks dead. I'm about to say, how would somebody be able to tell if it was, something like lack of maintenance?
I think the adjusters are well versed in looking at that as far as coming out and say, hey, we can tell this tree should have been removed 2 years ago. It's been dead for a while. That should have been taken care of by the homeowner.
Sure.
I think so. I think it's pretty cut and dried most of the time on that, where they can determine that.
Gotcha. I know there's a lot of times when I drive up to, we'll look at a house and you'll see, the branches of a neighboring tree coming almost all over to the other person's yard, and like, well, my neighbor will be, liable for that if something happens with this tree. And I'm like, I don't think it's that clear, and I don't ever know how to correct. I did have a friend of mine tell me nobody owns trees. So he told me he used to work at one of the local insurance agencies here, and he's like, well, because nobody owns trees, if a tree falls out of somebody else's yard, then it's not their fault. You can own the land and the property, but I'll never forget his specific clarification was that nobody owns trees, and I was like, that. I don't understand.
I think he's right in what he's saying there to an extent. I think that dead issue where you're not maintaining your property, you're not doing what's necessary to avoid that.
Sure.
Then that's probably where they would say, that's how that would be characterized.
I mean, as far as I know that's a specific damage. When we have we do get a lot of windstorms here. Are there any other specific types of damage incidents that homeowners may not realize are covered under their home insurance policy that
I would probably go back to those water coverages. I think that's something I know I didn't think a lot about that, where pipes can bust. There's just so much damage that can be caused by water in that sense. So I think it does you a service to review your policies on that and say, okay, how much water backup do I have? How much of these type of coverages do I have? And then, flood, again, is something to consider, having a separate policy on that. Those are kind of the gaps in what I see from what people maybe could look into for that.
I mean, you talked about reviewing, their policy. How often would you suggest somebody do that, come in and review their policy? Is that something they should do yearly?
Yeah, I think annually or yearly is certainly on the table there. People, it comes to mind about like jewelry, or somebody's got a new watch or ring that
that makes sense.
They have at that time, and we can talk about that, how best to cover that, whether it's scheduling it on the policy itself. There are some limits on, like, if you have a $20,000 Rolex, you want to probably look at getting that appraised and then schedule that on your homeowner's policy.
What does that mean when you say schedule it? What does that mean?
Meaning it has a separate line item to where we define the value, and usually with an appraisal say, okay, this is what you have, this is what it's worth, and that way if anything happens to it, we know right where to go to pay that claim.
Gotcha.
To look at that.
Gotcha. So basically, if you have things that are, very expensive that are not attached to the home or something like that, is that what you mean?
Right. There's some what we call the contents replacement cost coverage. That's kind of the broader term for things like your furniture, clothing, those things. But those items that have exceptional value, that's more than that.
Exceptional value.
That's
a good term.
Out of the ordinary value, where you want to make sure those are covered. I would review that with your agent and say, okay, what do we need to have this covered?
Sure. So, and not just expect those things to, oh man, that would be heartbreaking. Like somebody broke in and stole. I mean, I guess I've always wondered, in those replacement costs for like the contents of the home, that your personal belongings, how do they go about judging whether or not this is, what they're going to replace and how much they're going to give you to replace those things?
The adjuster, I always recommend keeping a list so it just makes it easier on the adjuster.
Gotcha.
If you have a loss, of course, he's going to ask you, what it was, want some details of it. Pictures are always a good idea to say, that would more quickly pay your claim. He's not necessarily looking to not pay the claim, but he needs evidence of you had those items, what condition they were in, those kinds of things.
So just keeping a record if you're making purchases. I know there are a lot of niche buyers. They buy different things. So probably just keeping a record of those purchases, like maybe the some kind of bill of sale or receipt or something like that to show. Okay.
That would be a good idea.
Gotcha.
And just any documentation you can have on it. The value, what you paid for it. I mean, they're pretty good at that, but it always helps them, on those items. Another thing to think about on that is we have a lot of firearms that people have collections of guns. Man. So you want to ask
you get into a hot topic, doesn't it?
Yeah, I deal with that a lot where people ask, they have pretty extensive gun collections and they want to know, are those covered? Right. So you want to ask because carriers can differ from that as to how much they will pay for those items. So you want to just make sure you know how much you have, and then ask those questions. Are there any limits to that? So
now, I mean, when let's say they're coming to you to see what kind of insurance opportunities they have out there, is that something that you're able to like give them guidance on? Because like you said, yours, you're not captive, right? So will it be different for each policy that you're able to pull up for them?
So that's why we're asking those specific questions, is to kind of discover what you need and then what product I have. So, you know, it sounds like you're asking kind of strange questions, but sometimes, you know, how many pets you have, what kind of dog you have.
Sure.
You're asking because you want that to be placed with the right carrier, so you don't have any issues with that.
Pets? Do you mean not like pet cover, like you're covering the pets, but more so like
liability?
Liability. Okay. Okay. If somebody would come
so
and
they have a history of biting,
sure,
or they're a certain breed. Some carriers are fine with those breeds. Some want to kind of say, you know, we want to exclude that. You know, so you just have to write the policy right with the right carrier.
Are there ever any like surprise breeds of dogs that you see that are not, you know, that insurance coverages are not? I heard like Dalmatians are considered aggressive breeds.
Yeah, I've seen that on a couple of carriers. You know, it's usually your German Shepherd, the typical ones: German Shepherd, Rottweiler, Pit Bull.
German Shepherd?
Yeah, German Shepherd. So I don't really consider them that, but yeah, they must have and they do it by, I think, obviously the numbers of claims they see on those kinds of breeds of dogs.
I guess so.
I don't think they're singling out. You know, they're doing it with some factual stuff.
Gotcha. I didn't. No, that's actually news to me. I'm a dog lover, but I thought that German Shepherds were normally pretty. I don't know.
I guess any of them that are bred to be the least bit aggressive, there's potential there for something.
I understand that. Different liability. You know, are there things that on the liability side that people should be aware of and cover themselves on that might typically be missed?
Yeah, I would just be sure that your carrier is not things like swimming pools, trampolines. You know, if you're going to have those things, you want to make sure that your company is, you know, and you're going to, like for me, I have a trampoline. The kids' friends come over.
Sure, I didn't even think about that.
Those are potential risks. So you got to make sure your carrier is okay with you having those, and just make sure you're covered there.
I did not even think about trampoline. And we got one of my kids just tore down the net on it. I don't know why. I was like, all this area to jump. We got one of the big trampolines too. That's all this area that you got, and they tore it down, and they look, I'm sorry. I'm like, well, you know, and fortunately, we don't have a whole lot of company that comes over, but of course, in that instance, it's probably better to be prepared than we live in the age where people will sue you.
Yes. So you want to make sure you have the right limits on that, because things do happen even if you plan for them. You know, we try to write the highest liability limits.
Sure.
That's actually one of the cheaper parts of the policy, believe it or not. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to have 100,000 liability instead of 500,000, $1 million.
Oh, really?
Just it helps you a lot more than what it costs.
Sure.
You know,
definitely.
So that's another area I would really review, and not keep that low just to save $12 a year, you know. So
$12.
Yeah, it's not.
And you would be surprised. I'm sure the people would do to cut any cost that they can.
Yeah, and I would find other ways to cut costs than on my insurance, I think, because that does come into play a lot more than people realize.
Sure. So. As far as any additional coverage beyond basic home insurance, I know we talked about home insurance. You talked about the water. Because it seems like the water. Now, is that water that you coverage that you're talking about, is that a part of the standard policy, or is that something that you can have increased or improved on your policy?
Yes. Some water coverages are built in, like sudden and accidental is typically built into most policies all the way to the policy limit. So those are things like frozen pipes, you know, things that are sudden and accidental. But the ones that are kind of left to the discretion of the agent and then the customer are like water backup, foundation water.
Oh, yeah.
Those are kind of variables that sometimes you can either leave off or leave at lower limits. So I would just really, you know, consider those limits when they're.
And this is kind of a random. It just popped in my head. Sorry, sometimes this happens too. I kind of get on a roll and start thinking about the different scenarios. I've been getting a letter in the mail from SWEPCO about the electrical stem that comes out of my house. Mm-hmm. Is that not covered in my home insurance policy?
So sometimes there's limits to that. They call that service line coverage.
Okay.
So my thought on that is I would for myself, I've taken those options to where they will, for a small amount, cover those lines, because there are some limitations on a lot of home policies. If it's from your house to the line, then most policies cover them somewhat. Service line, that again, that's an additional added to most policies. So
gotcha.
If you don't have that on your policy, you can get it from those kinds of sources. If you do have it and it's a limit that you're comfortable with, then you are covered. But it's just kind of one of those endorsements that you need on there.
Sure. I mean, do you have any like any real life instances that you can give where, how homeowners insurance, either expectedly or unexpectedly have come through to help your clients?
Yeah, I would go back to that water claim I was talking about. Another part of that, those policies, is what we call loss of use. Mm-hmm. So if you're displaced from the house while it's being repaired, they're going to pay your living expenses to say go live at a hotel or wherever you need to go. They're going to pay that amount. So that's another. In that particular instance, they were displaced from the house. It was at least a year, I think, or close to a year.
Wow.
So that came in handy.
The $100,000 claim.
Yeah,
okay,
right.
Gotcha.
Right. So, and I followed that closely. He called me when it happened, and then we talked about it. So I got to see the whole process there of them unfortunately having to live in a not their home anymore.
Sure.
And that's not great, however you look at it. But
sure.
They did have insurance that paid for that. And then paid to fix the home because they had adequate coverage.
Gotcha.
Water-wise.
I think I'm actually seeing that around the corner from my house. I remember when the house went up for sale, I remember showing it, and another young couple came and bought it. They renovated it some, and then I drive by, because I drive by it pretty much every day. I look up, the whole house is empty. They've got pods outside, and they're not moving. Like, the pods aren't being lifted and taken anywhere. And I saw some guys working around the house, and I thought to myself, oh, they must have had a big water issue. In those scenarios where you're having to file a claim, what's the homeowners, I guess what is their portion of the claim and the repair from that? What are they normally looking at?
So what they're kind of obligated are they want them obviously to secure their home. If they did have something happen, do their best to stop what's gone on and try to secure that from any further damage. Sure. But then after that, it's reporting it to either the agent, the company itself typically has a claims line, or even going online, you can do it
sure.
that way. And then what you want to do is get in contact with your adjuster at that point, and then they're the ones that come out, ascertain the damage, get all that information, and then pay your claim.
Gotcha.
So you work closely with those adjusters doing that. I kind of see my role in that is to help you navigate that process, assure you that things are going to go well. Most claims go pretty well on that side of it, but you just want people that will talk to you about it, answer your questions,
sure.
and try to get that resolved as quick as possible.
Does home insurance also cover different, like, I know there are a lot of people that like outbuildings, or they have like shops and things like that. Does your home insurance policy automatically cover that, or do you have to have that scheduled in as well?
So all homeowners usually have a built-in 10% extension for other structures. So if your house is covered for $100,000, it's built in to cover $10,000 for that other structure.
Gotcha.
Whatever it may be. So those are some of the questions we ask. What do you value that at? If it's $50,000, then we need to add coverage to that for other structures. So that's one thing to review. If you ever build a shop or something like that that has greater value than that 10% of your what they call coverage A, then we want to raise that.
Gotcha. In case an issue does happen, you don't mind being because I know you're helping to get the policy started. It seems like from there, if you actually have a claim, things start to get a little not necessarily difficult, as a homeowner. But I remember making a claim and thinking, when I first bought it, the guy that I actually no, first we had I want to say, I know I'm kind of a little squirrely right now, but I want to say I do find it very important now to have a local representative. We had Esurance when we first got married, and this is on the auto policy side, but oh my gosh, I learned very quickly, that there is a difference. Yes, we were saving money because, being that I guess a strictly online business, they were able to save us a few dollars, but then we also lost out a little bit on the service side. Can you talk a little bit about, your thoughts on having a local rep?
Yeah, I think that's where we add value, because I do see it as my role. Anytime I write a policy, that I'm advocating for you as well to help, whether it's helping you just navigate that, getting the adjuster to call you back, assuring you that this is how this goes, and just kind of be a voice of helping you navigate it.
Yeah.
I can't necessarily write you a check for it, but I can tell you the process of how we go about getting that done, and just be an advocate for you there. I can, sometimes claims are complicated. It does take a while to get those resolved, but, talking about it, learning what to expect, what the expectations are, setting those right is part of what we do.
Do you ever catch a lot of flack from, from clients and customers when things don't go necessarily the way that they thought that it would go?
Not as much as I really can't say it's been a lot of that. Most of the carriers we work with have been really good about claims, and it hasn't been. But I know, just expectations wise, a lot of times that's the issue of, I should have that, quicker. Everybody wants it now. And sometimes they do get a little worried that it's not going well, when really that's just the process of how it goes. Unfortunately, it's not as quick as sometimes any of us want it to be. But that's what I've seen most of. It's just not as quick as what everybody expects on that.
And as far as expectations, setting for, do you does it make it more difficult when since y'all are not captive, to have clear expectations set for the company that you're that you're finding insurance or letting people select their insurance with?
I don't think so. I mean, we really take claims seriously. We're going to advocate for the customer. If the adjuster's not getting back with them timely, we're going to call and ask why, what's going on, what do we need to get you. A lot of times it's just something that they haven't got yet, or really those guys, and their job is to get those done as quickly as possible. So we try to facilitate the communication is the main thing. Like, how do we get communicated what needs to be communicated? Every now and then we run into something that's a challenge, and we try to step in and say, hey, this customer, needs this, what can we do to get this resolved?
Sure. So, can you list out any of the companies that y'all are shopping for the customer?
There are about 15. Some of the more well known, Travelers, Safeco, Progressive, National General. We also offer Allstate now, Nationwide. Some of the bigger names you've heard of that advertise, and some that don't. So it just kind of, Homeowners of America is one that not many people have heard of, but they're a good carrier for us.
Interesting.
Mercury has been a good carrier lately for us. So it kind of goes with their their want to be in the market at any particular time. So it does change year to year what carriers make the most sense.
Gotcha.
Some want to come in with really good rates and get into our market, and so that's what customers can take advantage of.
Does it help the customer that they are basically, because when you're shopping around, not shopping around, I guess I don't know if that's the correct terminology, but when you're gathering different insurance carriers and getting rates and things like that, do the companies know that your clients are looking at and comparing theirs, and does that help them at all? I mean, as far as like the competition wise, does that help them at all to get better rates?
Yeah, I think over time they can see that where where do we need to be at to get more of these. I think probably on that level they're looking at. We have a proprietary rater, they call it. So
Gotcha.
I can feed in the basic information of the client and get those carriers' rates to come back in one location. So it makes it easy
Sure.
to track that
Sure.
and to see who's winning those. So I'm sure on that level they look at that.
When it comes to rates, I mean, what are some of the things that are affecting the rates that people are able to receive?
So
Is credit
credit is a factor.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was really just throwing that out there.
10 years or so ago or more now, I think all carriers have moved to some kind of credit base. They all have their different.
Wow.
They all weight it differently, I think.
Sure.
But it's seen as a way to determine the likelihood of claims, I think, is how their numbers people have determined it.
Gotcha.
They've done studies on that somehow. I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, whether a hailstorm comes or not is not based on your credit.
Sure. Right.
But anyway, that is a factor.
But hailstorms in the area.
Yeah. So it can break down to zip codes even. If a carrier has a lot of losses in those areas, then their rates are going to have to reflect that in those areas.
Insurance, the industry of insurance has so much data. It's really kind of scary how much data they are able to acquire. I mean, in order to get the coverage, you're almost having to say, hey, yes, this data is able to be accessed. And I can understand it. I used to be with the crowd of, man, insurance is a scam. I'll be honest, before I became a homeowner, insurance is a scam. They just, they do all this. But I also understand the business side of it, in that I will cover you if you have an accident, but I want it to be an accident. I don't want people that are just going around and just haphazardly doing whatever, and now you expect me to cover, what you, for one, it's not feasible. It's not a feasible business model. And for two, I mean, that's just kind of taking advantage of the system.
Right. They've got to figure out how to determine the risk and charge the appropriate premium. So when it comes down to, because it's a matter of time before claims are coming.
Sure.
And they've got to have the right amount of backup money to pay those claims. So really, and then of course they're trying to build in some profit for that. So there's people that's their whole thing, is to figure out what risk factors help us determine what premiums to charge and how to do that. So
what do you, and when it comes like to the difference between auto and home insurance, I know with auto insurance, but I've heard with auto insurance, if you have an accident, your rates are gonna go up. Is it the same with home insurance? Like, will you see
really
a
what I've seen in that is the frequency. So if you have a hailstorm that's out of your control and they have a claim, I wouldn't expect your rate to go up per se because of that.
Sure.
If you had a water claim, a theft claim, and another claim, then that might be an indicator in a 2-year period. Then you could see that affecting that.
There's a trend going on here.
Right. But from what I can tell, just the randomness of claims, it shouldn't. The only impact there would be like if the town of Longview had a big hailstorm, then your rates are going to be affected by that. And that's what some people, I didn't have a claim, but in reality, those companies have to spread that across their whole book of business.
Sure.
And that's how that typically.
The person is, out shopping for home insurance and everything for the first time. It almost seems kind of pointless to shop around when Goosehead could shop around for them. Give you a little chance to, to brag a little bit more about Goosehead if you like. Besides that, the being not being captive. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to learn that terminology. Mm-hmm. I keep saying it, I know. What are some other things you feel like, besides your own personal customer service? What do you think are some things that stands out, for Goosehead to make them a?
Yeah, I think from the standpoint of like I'm your advocate in that setup, because I'm not focused on one product that I'm selling you. I can shop the market, sell you what you need versus what I have.
Gotcha.
So a captive agent's going to say, yes, I have the best policy. And, implied in that is it's the only policy. Like that's kind of a contradiction. So if I'm shopping all those different carriers, then I think I truly am trying to do that in that kind of a scenario.
Sure.
And Goosehead prides itself on the service aspect. After we have the policy, you want somebody there you can call. You want somebody to handle your service needs ongoing. And we have a really great setup for that for customers with technology, with everything that's cutting edge out there on that technology front.
Sure. As far as I had a train of thought and it just left me. But when it comes to, people are, very, I don't know, people are pessimistic, I guess when it comes to situations like this. Mm-hmm. You personally, what do you feel stands out about you as an insurance agent? What do you feel like separates you yourself?
I'm going to always look at it as to how I would look at it. I'm going to put myself in their shoes and I'm never going to separate what I would want done for myself, I guess. I would not want to put somebody or I'm going to treat them like I would treat a family member, friends, because they are going to be hopefully long-term relationships with those people. So I'm not going to look at it as a short-term, I just want to make money kind of transaction. I'm gonna look at it more as a relationship, as a trusted advisor on that. So that's how I'm gonna see that.
I've come to find out, really that's probably the only way to continue especially in a service type business. I know you sell products, mm-hmm. but it's actually kind of a service business. I don't really see myself as a salesman per se. I guess that's kind of implied in what we do, but that's not my first instinct. Is to sell, and that may not be great to say that. Goosehead, don't listen to this, would you?
Right, but obviously that's part of it, and I want to do well at sales, but in that it's a service relationship. That's how I think that those go hand in hand. Sure. I don't think you have to be. They're mutually exclusive. You can be called you can do both.
Yeah. Actually, before I got started in this, my little brother started selling cars. And, in your mind, you have this caricature of what a car salesman is, mm-hmm. based on. I'm sure that there are people that are really like the ones that you see on TV, mm-hmm. the talkative and mm-hmm. pushy. When he got into it, I was like, why would he get into car sales? I think it was probably just one of the better opportunities he had at the time. But once he got into it, he became knowledgeable. Mm-hmm. He literally sold me all of my vehicles mm-hmm. because he would find something that fit within what I was looking for. Mm-hmm. Hey, there's this opportunity here. You said you wanted this. This has all those features. Would you consider it? And in my head, before I became an agent, I was like, well, that's it. Mm-hmm. I don't think that people have as much of a fear of you as a salesman. It's more so just, hey, are you going to try to just get something out of me, or mm-hmm. is this a relationship that we're going to have? And so now I look up, and he's got constant repeat business. Mm-hmm. I'm finally getting to a place where I'm getting repeat business, from people, and you realize, honestly, just if I can establish a great relationship and look out for people mm-hmm. in the way that I would want to be looked out for, find out people actually will come back to you and then refer you.
Yeah. And I think that's what sales comes down to. It's become a kind of a negative thing, but it's really getting people what they want and treating them right and providing that service. I mean, you call it what you want to. I mean, that's sales in that sense.
Well, I always like to tip my hat to, because coming up on year number 6 for me as a real estate agent, I feel like I'm, finally getting my legs under me. Of course, I love this industry because, I learn something new all the time. But I always like to tip my hat to people that have, helped me along the way. So I like to share, with everybody that, for one, that I appreciate you because when I first got started, you contacted me out of the blue. Said, "Hey, man, I see you're a new agent. You want to come have lunch?" And for one, I was super nervous. I was like, I don't even know what you do at a business lunch. I don't know anything about real estate. I'm just getting started. But I really appreciated the boost of confidence to have somebody that was knowledgeable in a business that was directly tied to my business, to say, "Hey, I need to call you. I've got this issue," or, "Hey, I've got somebody, that's looking for insurance. I've gotten a chance to actually sit down, talk with you. I know you're not a kind of person that's gonna, pull the wool over their eyes and in turn make me look bad." So I wanted to tell you, publicly, thank you for that initial investment in me, saying, "Hey, man, let me just, establish a relationship here." I really appreciated that.
Well, that's great to hear. I didn't know you felt like that, and that makes me feel proud that we had that start to the relationship.
Sure.
I appreciate that.
Sure.
That's what I see it as a relationship kind of business to where you trust me, you trust me that I'm going to do the best for your clients, and we all get the best outcome for the customer that way. I think.
Is there a way, that real estate agents can help you? Like, is there something that we could do, to improve the process for buyers, homeowners? Is there anything that you can think of? I know it's kind of out of the blue. Is there anything that you could think of that would, that may kind of grind your gears, that agents do? Like, "Oh man, I wish that y'all would."
Yeah, just to let them know that insurance is something they need to discuss a little more. Maybe it would be, I know the process is getting the home loan, getting qualified with that. I like to see customers know about things like a roof. How old is that roof? Because that for us is going to affect that person for a longer period of time. Just to have that education on what's important about this from an insurance side. And the roof being one of those main ones. I think just having them know, even if it is an older roof, what they're getting into on that would be a good thing to learn on that side.
Got you. Man, David, I've appreciated our discussion. There's a lot of things that I learned here today, and I really appreciate you coming by, taking the time. Is there anything else that stands out to you that you feel like you need to communicate to people that would be a benefit for them in this?
Yeah, just going back to just protecting that asset when you're buying a home. Make sure you have everything you need in a home policy. Don't be caught short without the right coverage on that. So it is the most expensive asset you'll probably ever have. So so be sure and protect it properly.
And I think it's a great motto. I'm glad that, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is, because I didn't know that Goosehead, is would shop around for different policies, and it is a staple of my business to shop around, so it is. I'm glad we got a chance to have this conversation, because I think it's very important. Don't just go to Liberty Mutual because they got all the commercials. I know the Emu is up there, and it's funny commercials. I don't know if they're part of your 15.
Not Liberty Mutual specifically. They own several companies, but yeah, they own Safeco, for example, and we do offer Safeco. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so some of those bigger companies have their hands in the independent.
Are those commercials really being honest when they act as if when they say that they're offering, different things that other insurance companies may not, or maybe they're not saying that, hey, we offer this and others don't. Maybe it's kind of implied, some of their coverages are unique to them.
Yeah, sometimes I think they are talking about some of those things like we talked about, open perils versus named perils. There are some policy differences there that if you don't have them written in a certain way, that they can have gaps in coverage. So I think that's true. Not all policies are standard. You've got to have certain endorsements. You've got to write them in a certain way.
Sure.
So that's a fair way to say that, I would say.
Gotcha.
That they're trying to highlight that not all policies are the same.
Gotcha.
On that. So.
Well, y'all, I think this is another testament. Everybody that's watching, thank you so much for your time. I think it's important just to reiterate, as we do on just about every show, the home buying process is one that comes at you quickly, and there's a lot of information. And I don't want to take it for granted that that you've got a lot of decisions to make with mortgages and the inspections, different things like that. A lot of things we hear pretty frequently. I don't think we hear enough, hey, we need to take time in learning about these insurance policies, what's offered, what's covered. That way, for one, you have clear expectations, and then also, two, you can feel more comfortable knowing that that you're covered. So, David, if somebody's got questions, they want to review their policy and see what else is out there, how can people contact you?
They can call me direct. My number is 903-253-2524, and that'd be the best way. Yeah, it's got a lot of twos there, but that's the best way to get in touch with me.
Sure.
By email, david.wolfe@goosehead.com. Would get me by email.
That's Wolf with an E.
Wolf with an E.
Wolf
Yes.
with an E.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Yes, sir.
Man, I greatly appreciate your time coming through and educating me and hopefully everybody else that's watching. And in the future, hopefully we come back, have you back on again, and we'll talk about some more specific things. But I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been fun.
Awesome. All right, y'all. If you have any insurance needs, please feel free to contact David. If you have home ownership questions, home buying questions, home selling questions, I'm your guy. Please contact me, 903-806-6905, and we can have a conversation, map out a plan. One thing that I like to do, if you are buying a house, is put it on the calendar. Hey, we got to select home insurance about that third week. By the third week into your closing, that 30-day period, we want to have home insurance selected, and I'd love to connect you with somebody awesome like David. Thank you so much, everybody that has been watching. All of those that have been following the show, I greatly appreciate your time. If you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, listening on Spotify, you can even watch on Spotify now. Actually, it's actually called Spotify has a specific podcasting website now. Everybody that's listening and taking the time to just follow along. Hopefully you're getting great insights. If you found this informative and helpful at all, please like, share it, subscribe. It does wonders in the algorithm, and we're able to get our message out and information to more people. So thank you so much, y'all, and we will catch you on the next episode. Thank you.